7th of November 2017, the local media reported that Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa had been fired from ZANU-PF and government a month before he could celebrate his third anniversary as the VP of the Republic. Well, Comrade Mnangagwa had been Comrade Mugabe's aide for over 50 years, and many were beginning to see him as a shoe-in to succeed President Robert Mugabe. 15 party members were also expelled from the party for allegedly working with Comrade Mnangagwa. This also saw the country's 10 provinces endorse Dr. Grace Mugabe as vice president. Then on the 13th of November 2017, the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, the ZDF commander, General Constantine Guvea Chiwenga, asserted that the military will not hesitate to step in if the country's revolution was threatened. General Chiwenga indicated that drastic action will be taken immediately to stop counter-revolutionaries from sliding Zimbabwe back into colonization. Well, fast forward to the 15th of November 2017, Major General Spusiso Moyo announced an hour later that the army had stepped in to defuse a potential crisis. He insisted that the army had not effected a coup and would not harm Comrade Mugabe. Well, the statement read by General Spusiso Moyo stated that action taken by the ZDF did not represent a military takeover of the government, but it is meant to address political, social and economic situation that could have ended in a violent conflict. Now, joining me in the studio to discuss this issue further is Dr. Shingi Munyeza. He's already in the studio. Welcome to Capital 100.4 FM.
Thank you, Thamie, and good evening to your listeners.
Well, you can also send your contributions and your views and comments on our hotline number, which is 0717 777 777. But before we get into a discussion, let us take a short commercial break, and after that, we'll continue with Dr. Munyeza.
This summer, get your golfing shoes on and join us at the Royal Harare Golf Club for the annual ZANU-PF National Championships on the 24th of November. Register and take this opportunity to network and engage with decision makers and industry leaders. Play format is 4-ball better ball, and the registration fee is $50 per player or $200 per 4-ball. Email golf@zitf.co.zw or call 09-884-911 up to 6 for more information about the golf day or available advertising space. ZANU-PF National Golf Championships. It's more than just golf, it's making connections. Proudly supported by Capitalk 100.4 FM, leading the conversation.
Indeed, it is Capitalk 100.4 FM, and we lead the conversation. Joining me in the studio right now is Dr. Shingi Munyeza to discuss the big issue of where are we going as Zimbabwe after the events that happened over the last 5 days. Dr. Munyeza.
Well, this is a very turning point in our history. It is a Kairos moment. It is a moment of decisions that have to be made with clarity and with posterity in mind. Mm-hmm. I think when you go back, Zimbabwe has probably been around similar events, not so much in the same way that this one has happened, where we were at almost at stalemate with each other. You look at in the early 80s, the Matabeleland disasters and massacres that happened.
The Kukurahundi massacres.
The Kukurahundi, and then that ended off with a unity accord between ZAPU and ZANU. And then fast forward, you go all the way from 1999 and then to 2008.
Now, this was the time during the formation of MDC.
MDC is formed, all that, the land issue, and that led to elections in 2008, which were a bloodbath type of elections, and then that resulted in a GNU. So my real sober understanding of where we are is that whenever we were given a chance to resolve the foundational issues in our country, we glossed over them. This is the third moment that we are almost given by fate that we should be able to handle. And from my perspective, it's a God-given chance to deal with our issues once and for all. So yet again, we're at that crossroads where if we don't do this properly, we'll revisit this situation again. So Zimbabwe's issues will always be unresolved. We gloss over them. We are comfortable in a season where we think, oh yeah, at least there's a reprieve, there's a relief. And I think that what we have enjoyed is the reprieve and the relief.
But wouldn't you say the stance taken by the military, our generals, is more of a diplomatic approach in resolving the issues that you've raised?
I don't think it's a diplomatic approach. I would say it's an intervention, as they put it, but that intervention was brought about not necessarily because people had suffered. I don't think that's where the real point of ignition came. The point of ignition came because there was a collapse of leadership at the ruling party. There was a stalemate. Now, whenever there is a mutually hating stalemate, it brings in everybody's interest to the fore. So finally, there appears now at this point to have a mutually hating stalemate, that it is hurting the leadership in ZANU-PF, it's hurting the leadership in government, it has been hurting the normal person in the street, the normal civilian, the ordinary Zimbabwean out there. It has been hurting them for all along. But that hurting of the ordinary Zimbabwean out there was not of a serious consequence that allowed for an intervention until there was another hurting that appeared at the leadership level.
So would we say then that this is being done in the interest of politicians and army generals to protect their own interests?
Primarily, because it's hurting finally it's hurting the leadership. So they've got to resolve their issues first. Understand that the intervention, that it's a leadership intervention. So it's not a mass uprising of the ordinary Zimbabwe. The ordinary Zimbabwean didn't mass uprise and go to State House and march all the, even the Saturday events.
We'll talk about that.
So there were post-events. So this is a leadership initially solving the internal problems. And for me, I think that there is credence in always leadership to solve their own problems, because they have a domino and contagion effect on those who are being led. However, that is where now the conversation must be, that are we continuously going to just solve the leadership crisis? Because at ZANU-PF and ZAPU unity accord, it resolved the leadership problems. At the GNU, it resolved the leadership problem. The underlining issues of posterity, governance, constitutionalism, our values, our vision, were not resolved at a common man's perspective. So right now we have another situation where leaders need to resolve their stalemates. And unfortunately, we've been hurting so much, we think this is also the common man's opportunity to come in and also say, look, please deal with us finally. And I hope that that is where this thing will gravitate towards.
Now, let us go back to the march. What was the impact or the significance of it?
The march was a moral suasion issue. It was not a constitutional thing that will cause anybody to make the decision that way if they didn't, because it had to be processed still. It's always pressure. It's exerting pressure on leadership to say, look, we're in a terrible mess right now. So can you come in and resolve our current crisis, the poverty, corruption, just basic, lifestyle, basic standards of living have really collapsed in this country. So can we resolve this together as well? So that was the significance. But also the other significance was that Zimbabweans have always desired to speak with one voice.
And they got that opportunity over the weekend.
Because there has been a culture, and I've said this at many fora that I'm involved in, that there has been a systemic, institutionalized fear and intimidation in our country. So for the first time, that fear lead was removed, and people were able to express themselves, because the army then safeguarded that no one's going to harm you. Say whatever you want. And the amazing thing is that the Zimbabweans that walked and that marched did it in a non-violent fashion.
There was no looting.
There was no looting, there was no police, there was self-policing. I was one of those that walked from Highfields to the city. So for me, it was just an experience to see, is this for real? And also just connect with the common man in the street. And it was a sea of people just walking from Zimbabwe grounds to the city. But they'd found their voice to say, look, we can actually be normal human beings. We don't have to behave schizophrenic. I mean, at the moment, because of fear and intimidation, we are schizophrenic. You know, in public we tend to say one thing, but when we cuddle in private, we now say the real thing.
Okay.
And that is because of this, that what I'm calling the systemic, institutionalized fear and intimidation that we have grown into, and now we can't be ourselves. So yes, so the significance on Saturday was that as well. It's just, we can actually say our issues peacefully without violence. We can actually communicate our cry. I mean, I was walking and I asked this old lady, above 60, and she was saying to me, and I was asking, why are you walking? He says, look, I haven't been paid for 17 months. And I still go to work. I have kids to feed and they must go to school. And my walk is just to say this must stop. And then I said, but when you get to the city or when you get to Robert Mugabe Square, what are you going to do? Sit, and then I will walk back. And this is an old lady who walks there and walks back. And that is their expression of, I just want a normal life. With all the resources that we have, with all the intellect and the education we have, we don't deserve the standards of living that we are having right now.
All right, just 10 days ago, we saw the elevation of Dr. Grace Mugabe to the position of VP. She was already first secretary in the Women's League. And we also saw the firing of former Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa from ZANU-PF. Would you say this brought in the division to say we have to stop it? We have seen Maim Juru being fired, and now it's Emmerson Mnangagwa being fired, being accused of ABCD, which wasn't probably factual. He hasn't been taken to court. He's fired based on hearsays.
Yeah, I would say that this was the events you have just narrated to. That was the drop that filled the ocean, that made the ocean overflow. I think there's been a lot of boiling underneath. There've been undercurrents. There've been disagreements that have been politely contained amongst themselves in the ruling party. The factions were at each other's throat. It was not a secret, but when they got together, they behaved as if nothing was happening. Soon after whatever meeting they were having, they'll be on each other's throat. So it was something that was coming through, and that became the climax of it all. And that brought in the final, the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. So I don't think that it was just the gravity of what happened there. It had been building up. I mean, you can go back from about June to the 7th of November. This was climaxing to the Congress that was coming in next month, or that's coming in next month. So it was deliberate. I don't think even it was just by sheer fate and things just happened. This was being planned amongst the factions themselves. Who gets there first?
So Emmerson Mnangagwa has been accused of being the leader of the Lacoste faction. Who was the leader then of the G40? Because here we have a president who's obviously seeing division happening in front of his eyes in his own party, and he says nothing about it. He lost control.
Let me just, my observation is always trying to observe it from a non-partisan, because I come from a church background. So I try and see where really the issues are. Whilst the former Vice President Mnangagwa was the leader for the Lacoste faction, the leader for the G40 was definitely the First Lady from now what culminated. Because what culminated is exactly where the head-on collision arose. The head-on collision didn't arise between, let's say, Mnangagwa and Jonathan Moyo, who are being purported to be the factional leaders, or the cabal from G40, or it was Xavier Kasukuere, or those clashes have happened, but it didn't boil over. But the clashes then that happened between the vice president then and the first lady showed who was actually the leader of these factions. Then I think that the president played the whole puppet master game plan, and either elevating one, bringing down one, and so on. And this was a public secret. I don't think that anybody sits there and says, oh, I didn't know that was happening. You know that earlier on in the year, there was a whole move to remove Xavier Kasukuere as the commissar of the party, and 10 out of 10 provinces voted him out, and then come the last minute, he has a reprieve. So these were games that were played by those factions. So if you were to ask this question, who was leading, I think that the two leaders were the First Lady and Mnangagwa.
Well, joining me in the studio in this hour is Dr. Shingi Munyeza, and we are discussing the current political situation in Zimbabwe, and we will try and also check your views and comments on the political setup that is happening right now in our motherland. The number to get in touch with us is 0717 777. Let me just pick up one WhatsApp message. And what struck me about the march was the multi-racial aspect. People of all races were helping each other and encouraging each other. That is Barry from Greendale. Who else dropped us in WhatsApp? To be honest, what is happening in ZANU-PF is for individuals who want to save their political lives. Zimbabweans are not being considered at all.
Yeah, that is exactly what my view is. So perhaps, Thamie, I think what then we should be talking about is what should be happening. What do Zimbabweans want? And I think I'm speaking from the non-partisan aspect, because I'm not aligned to any political party. But just speaking from really purely, what do Zimbabweans want? And I think that Zimbabweans are looking for a consensual process that invokes an inclusive transitional arrangement. Why do we need a consensual process? Is that everybody must agree to how do we go to the next stage? How do we cross this bridge together? How do we make sure that we are not just going back? I've given you two events in 1987 and in 2008. We had those flash points where we could have resolved our problems once and for all. But now we've got the third one, in my view, that is coming through, and Zimbabweans want their problems solved once and for all. So there must be a consensual process that invokes that inclusive transitional arrangement, and there has to be a transitional arrangement. Of course, there's been a talk out there, there's been National Transitional Authority and so on.
Now, do you think this transitional arrangement will include opposition parties?
It must.
Or ZANU-PF will decide, as usual, to go it alone?
You know, when you're in power, you can be so intoxicated by the power. Look at where we are today. So I think that ZANU-PF, if they were to take their own wisdom, they would need to include the opposition, because the benefits we initially got from the GNU showed that if there is some level of, just even if it was skewed against the opposition, if there's some level of inclusivity, there is a lot of progress. People come together. Look at November 18, the march. The level of inclusivity, look at how people express themselves. It's not bad. It actually is not a loss of power. It is actually to say we want the Zimbabweans to get their full benefit as citizens of this country. So I would suggest that ZANU-PF must be the one that reaches out to say, we want to include everybody. Maybe this is not the time to run for elections. For example, without a level playing field, and a real capacitation and a resourcing of the institutions that drive our elections, I don't think that we should be having elections. We should resolve that so that the outcome of elections are credible, are non-contestable, and that we should start having people.
But will this not give ZANU-PF enough time to regroup? Because as we speak right now, they are in pieces.
Yeah, well, I guess the issue is always trying to ambush one another. But I'm saying that if that's why I'm saying it's consensual. So it can't be dictated by ZANU-PF. It has to be allowed. Every participant, not even just the politicians, the business, civic organization, churches, like where the constituents I come from, there must be an inclusivity around that, so that when it is agreed, it's no longer well, if we give the well, it's gonna be a ZANU-PF, and somebody's gonna benefit here, somebody's going to recover from their wounds. No, but we have agreed. So I'm just saying, doesn't matter whether we do this for a period of 6 months, which I doubt would be good, would be long enough to sort out all the outstanding, the problem. Yes, the problem. Because first and foremost, without actually, besides sorting out the level playing field, people are suffering right now.
There's no money in the bank.
Yes, you got to get some intervention at an economic level. We've had an intervention at a political level. We need an intervention at an economic level.
Start building the country.
And start building the country. And that there is a deliberateness by everybody that what is important is not for them to just end up in power, but what is important for them is that we need a better Zimbabwe for everyone. And that's this issue of saying, look, then if I get into power, this is what has got us here. It got us to there in 1987. It got us to there in 2008. Now it has got us to here in 2017. And we have to have the willpower as Zimbabweans now, not just those who are in political leadership, but everyone. I'm talking about civic organization, business, churches, and the political parties must come in and say, look, we must sit under one roof in one place and agree on the way forward.
Now, in his address last night, President Robert Mugabe shocked a lot of people. People expected him to step down as the head of state, but he never mentioned anything regarding stepping down. In fact, he said he is going to address the ZANU-PF Congress, which is coming up in December on as of the 7th until the 14th, I think, of December. How is he going to do that when he has been fired from the party?
Now, this one here, Thamie, I think we've got to look at what are the processes that are at play. Here are the processes that I believe are at play. First and foremost, there is an intervention which is supposed to be not a coup. Okay? So the military has told us it's not a coup. One of the things to demonstrate that it is not a coup is to allow the head of state to function as the head of state. So on Friday, he was allowed, was it Friday or Thursday, he was allowed to do the graduation at ZAU. And then on yesterday, on Sunday, he was then allowed to speak to the nation. The most important things that needed to be picked up from there was that we have the international community and indeed the citizens of Zimbabwe still putting the question mark on the army's intervention to be a coup. So we can argue all day and say, look, but it is a coup, and then the other parties would say it is not a coup. So what the army had to do at that point was to demonstrate that this wasn't a coup. They didn't need to demonstrate that we've cornered him, that he must resign. That is not in the place of the army to do that. It's in the place of the political party that he belongs to. It's in the place of the government that he leads. It's in the place of parliament that he leads. Or that is set up as an arm of government. Now, so come yesterday, first of all, if you look at the meandering of the presentation and the speech given by the president, first of all, one point that came out very clearly was that I am alive and I'm well. And I'm in charge. So guess what happened? The optics are also good. The commanders saluted. They greeted him and they saluted him, all of them. Which means he's still the commander-in-chief. So point number one. Point number two, he then says that what has happened and my discussion with the command element was that the situation we are in was deteriorating. And what the army has done is above the law. So it is not a crime, it is not treason. So point number two, so the army had to be released from the perception that they've committed a treasonous act. The third thing was to tell the international community that we are okay, we are able to solve our own problems, we don't need your intervention. It's business as usual. Now, to sort out the problems that have been raised, we're going to start entrepreneurship programs in the growth points. I mean, I read that, I listened to that message twice, so I get the points correctly. And then we're going to process some of these things at government level and come up with policy that alleviates the poverty and or the pain that the populace is going through.
So it means then he is still in charge as the head of state and government and commander-in-chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces.
Exactly. And then he goes to the party. He could never have said, I think I want to leave the party, or I think my party doesn't want me. As the first secretary of the ruling party, we are going to process this at the extraordinary Congress, which is next month.
That he's going to preside.
Yes. What am I saying? I am saying that he has to project that all is well. Actually, we are continuing business as usual. And that the issues raised by the command element are all relevant and need to be dealt with to bring our people back to a proper way of life. So that was the purpose of last night's address to the nation. Understand also, you and I don't know what the negotiations in the background are like. We don't know what they are trading off. Remember, this is a stalemate at a leadership level. It is not asking you and I what do we want to be discussed with the president. It's what they're negotiating with the president. We know out there, everybody's saying the president must go. Well, not everybody. The march was to say president must go. And there is that cry that is coming out. So if that is the cry that is coming out, the president is saying, I'm dealing with it. So the track that must now be processed is the party process and the government process.
The government one, yes.
So on the same day, on Sunday, the party process got to the point that they recalled their first secretary and asked him to resign. Then that triggers a government process or a parliamentary process, which then says the parliament must meet to impeach
the president.
The president. So that is the process. Whether he then resigns in between or not, those processes are running. Now, one of the things that a lot of us, because the emotion and the pain we're going through, we don't process this correctly, is that the president has always hung on to certain principles. So even when the constitution would be broken, whether it is during elections, whatever it is, in his own view, there was always either the optics about following the constitution was always there. So I guess that is what is being pursued, that I want us to go through this constitutionally, at a party level, constitutionally at a government level. So that's that's what the play out is. So if you're expecting him to resign, I think that he would have if he wanted to.
Now there have been concerns from certain political parties saying a precedence has been set whereby the army steps in willy-nilly and takes over. Isn't that now going to be the norm going forward, to say, as the last line of defense, the army can always come in and say we are solving issues and take over governments, legitimately elected governments?
You know, I don't think that precedent is now. Let's wind back. 1987. The common denominator has been the army, and whether rightfully or wrongly. So in this event, it is the army that has come in. Where does this come from? It comes from how Zimbabwe's independence was won.
Through the barrel of a gun.
Yes, but also the whole war veteran support and the war veteran role in the goings on and going into the future of the country. So that has continued to be the thing that drives where we are, and that has even got us to where we are in some cases. So the war veterans, when they were kicked out of the party, obviously for us we should have noticed that that is the crack that is going to lead to some catastrophe in the future, because that's what led to now. If the war veterans had not been kicked out of the party, we wouldn't be where we are, because the army and the war veterans can hardly be separated because of that legacy or that background and historic background that we're coming from.
All right, let me take one or two WhatsApp comments coming through on our WhatsApp platform. And a good show. Now it's hard to trust the next leader. I think whoever is going to take over in ZANU-PF is going to do what our current president did. Yeah, we need leaders to change. There is no name there.
Yeah.
Another WhatsApp message, Anzi, but ZANU-PF seems to think that including the opposition in their agenda would mean reversing the gains of our liberation and submitting ourselves to colonization again. Can the doctor give us his opinion on this one?
I was also going through my
and shortly, I'm sure there is another announcement that should be coming through from the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. So we shall be broadcasting it live right here on Capital 100.4 FM as it happens.
Okay, let's go through that question. Go through that question again, Thamie.
All right. Let me go through. But ZANU-PF seems to think that including the opposition in their agenda would mean reversing the gains of our liberation and submitting ourselves to be colonized again. Can Doctor give us his opinion on that one?
I think a lot of events have passed on for us to think that working with ZANU-PF, working with the opposition, is reversing the gains of the war veterans have been very consistent somehow after their departure from ZANU-PF that the issue has now come that we must all treat each other as Zimbabweans. So that sort of spin of you're taking us back to being colonized, even the rhetoric within ZANU-PF is no longer saying that to a greater extent. It is more who is giving the best benefit to Zimbabweans. So I don't think that that should be sustained or is sustainable, even if ZANU-PF wanted to run with that sort of bandwagon. In the previous elections, they would run off with the issue of sanctions. We know that by and large, this is no longer a message that they can carry through and convince people in the street. So a lot of water has come under the bridge. So what Zimbabweans are looking for right now is that we want economic prosperity. In fact, first and foremost, we want our freedom. Remember, I told you that Zimbabweans are living under fear and intimidation. We are looking for shadows everywhere. We are worried that we might be killed. That is, first of all, they must get their freedom. The next thing is that Zimbabweans just want a normal life. I don't think that they want a life that is, just blown out of proportion, that is beyond their own ability to afford, but they just want a normal life, basic health, education, roof over their head. Zimbabweans want to be able to determine their future, to determine their leaders without necessarily having to be coerced and to be forced to choose whoever they want. Zimbabweans want to be able to be given equal opportunity to be able to get their best they can from the country that is so endowed with so much riches. So that's all they are looking for. They are not looking for being cornered again or being sold a story that is so old. Remember, 65% are below the age of 35. And that means these people have no experience of the war. They have absolutely no experience of the war. So that is where the situation is. So we've got to do something that appeals to the young people who must also have a future, who must be able to buy a house, be able to do whatever they need to do and get a better standard of living. So those are the 35 and below who are crying out and say, look, you know what, guys, you've got us here. You can tell us about colonialism. You can take about all this. What we want is basics in life.
Chete.
Chete, mvura, chikafu, chingwa.
In shelter.
In shelter.
Right. Another WhatsApp message. And any president who will replace Mugabe, whether from opposition or ruling party, I believe will do better than Mugabe. Let me go through another one. This one says General Chiwengo just finished his address now and says ED is coming back soon to discuss the roadmap with President Mugabe. So impeachment will go ahead. Anzisaka president avabve zvekumhanya zvavanofanira kunyora tsamba kuna speaker of parliament. All right, this is Capital 100.4 FM, and I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Shingi Munyeza, and we are discussing the political situation that we find ourselves in currently right here in Zimbabwe. What is the way forward? Give us your thoughts, your views, and comments on 0717 777 777. This is Capital 100.4 FM. Welcome back to Capital 100.4 FM. Good evening. My name is Thamie Mkandla, on the deep dive, standing in for Donald Mkota. And joining me in the studio is Dr. Shingi Munyeza, and we are discussing the political impasse that we find ourselves in. For your views and comments, drop us on 0717 777. Now, Dr. Munyeza, various sources are saying impeaching the president could actually be a long process. Explain, probably in a layman's language, my processes acho. Kuti zvingatore nguva yosvika ma 4 years here, and at whose expense? The taxpayers' money?
Well, you're going to throw me... First of all, you're going to throw me into a legal framework that I am not. I'm an accountant, I'm a marketer, I'm a pastor. So I have to declare my background. But let me just say, from my reading of the Constitution, it literally is a sitting of Parliament and a sitting of the Senate where they impeach the president on certain aspects of him unable or incapable or having violated his oath of office, and that they would like him to be removed as the president, and that requires 2/3 majority in a sitting. There are technicalities around there. I was trying to read earlier on in the afternoon, but I don't want to go into an area that I am not. But it just takes that, and then the president is impeached. Once he's impeached, he now has to hand over, or power or leadership has to be handed over to the second, or to the vice president who was acting the last time. As we know that Vice President Mpoko was the last one to act. And I don't know where he is at the moment. So that complicates the whole process amongst the negotiations. And the process is that Vice President Mpoko has already been expelled from his party. And has been called back, or that the president must then fire Vice President Mpoko. So it is now, you know, those movies where one is holding a gun and the other is holding a gun. So the impeachment process has gone that way, but the only one who can fire the vice president right now is the president himself. The only one who can resign on his own behalf is the president himself. However, the other process is the president to invite back the fired VP and restores him. Well, that's the logical and sensible and easier route. Restores him into office. After the impeachment, the vice president was fired, then takes over the presidency. Now, what are the negotiations taking place? If they've already fired Vice President Mpoko, who was seen to be aligned to the G40, which G40 was being put together under the First Lady, then you have a crisis where the president might not fire the vice president. Number one. You have a situation where the president might not invite the fired vice president and restores him to his original position, which means then he resigns. That would be an honorable thing to do. But this is not at home, and it's not even church. This is politics. So this game is going to have to be played out. Whoever has more ammunition in his pocket continues on the stage, so to speak. So the president has ammunition, the party has ammunition, the parliament has ammunition. It depends who has the most ammunition. So it's not an easy walk in the park, in my reading into this. It means that the night is still long.
I'm also told that his old friend, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, the former president of Zambia, is in town. What do you think probably he's saying to him?
I think that I've just read the speech read by the CDF, General Chiwenga here, and they've now dubbed this whole thing Operation Restore Legacy. So already it is, for me, it's showing me the undertones of the negotiating spirit. We want a good legacy. So it's not Operation Restore Order or Operation Restore Prosperity. No, it's legacy. So they're obviously talking to the president and negotiating with him about his legacy. And his legacy would only be understood by somebody like Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, because they are number one, they're age mates. Number two, they work together in the liberation of the sub-region. So they will be able to talk about that. So that's, I think now, bringing in someone like Kenneth Kaunda and not bringing in President Zuma or somebody like that is now, let's talk about your legacy. What do you want to be remembered for? And the only person who can speak to you about this is none other than your own contemporary. It's KK. So it's still negotiating. So at the moment it's trying to negotiate so that this thing doesn't go to the wire. So there's more negotiations. Obviously the president wants to make sure that he doesn't leave in a manner that will make him vulnerable post-leaving. At least him and his family.
All right, let me pick up one or two WhatsApp messages. And it is true that the power vested in the president he can stop Parliament from convening. Another WhatsApp message. And if Vice President Mnangagwa replaces Robert Gabriel Mugabe, I will still feel like we just have replaced Robert Mugabe with another. And the doc, don't we have to change our constitution system to do like what other democratic nations do, i.e. limit the excessive executive powers of a president? Iwoma powers aya andiwo anozotichemedza here mangwana.
This goes into what I was saying, that we need that non-partisan consensual process that invokes an inclusive transitional arrangement. And this is what the church is working on. We want, because there is so many extremes that have developed. First and foremost, I think we've got a reasonably good constitution when you compare with other constitutions in the sub-region. Maybe one that could be ahead of us is the South African constitution. However, there are still gaps where we need to realign and align the laws to the constitution. The president talked about 20 laws that need to still be realigned when he opened parliament recently. So there is need to realign those laws. But post-realigning, there is a real question mark on our constitutionalism. Whilst we have all this, it's almost like Zimbabwe has got all the documents on policy formation and policies that are good for an economy, but we never implement them. So we've got now a good constitution. Even after aligning the laws, we still behave unconstitutionally. So, and that speaks to our vision, and that speaks to our values, and that we are not together on this. So it's just paperwork. We have our own ways, and that's what we stick to. So I think that the next is constitutionalism. So if there was constitutionalism, then we should be able to check on each other, say, look, this thing that you do is not right. We should not even question the electoral processes, because once the laws are aligned, we should have a ZEC that is perceived to be independent. At the moment, you have a ZEC that is perceived not to be independent for one reason or the other. All those perceptions must be drowned away and must be removed by deliberate efforts. That's why this inclusivity approach has to deal with all those painful impressions and perceptions.
All right. It's a minute after the hour 9. Let me take this opportunity to thank Dr. Shingi Munyeza. We have been discussing the current political situation in Zimbabwe and the way forward. We're also hoping to have had a telephone discussion with Honorable Themba Muliswa. Apparently, he's attending some caucus somewhere right here in the capital, Harare. But all the same, we did have a great discussion with Dr. Shingi Munyeza, and thank you so much for your contributions, the Capital Loyalist. This is Capital 100.4 FM, leading the conversation.